As a reminder, this meeting is audio and video recorded. If I could get a Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to keep my comments brief. I did want to welcome our two new members. We have Jim Scully, who is in the empty Salisbury seat that Monique Grealick recently vacated, so welcome, Jim. And we also have Paul Goldner, who is joining us. He was appointed into Dan Valiente's old seat for Newbury, so welcome, Paul. And just as a point of clarification, because I've been asked this a couple of times, since there were open town seats on each of the subcommittees, Jim and Paul are going to essentially stay in where those open seats are, so that we don't have to try to cycle through. By way of kind of explanation, each of the subcommittees has to have one member from each town. So once we start sliding people around, it gets kind of complicated to make sure that we can keep one member from each town on each of those subcommittees. I want to acknowledge the District Communication Committee meeting that happened a few weeks ago. I know we're going to be having additional discussion on that down the road, but I thought it was a really good start. I appreciate the school committee members and the administration that attended coming to that night, because I think the more attendance that we can have at those and the more discussion that we can have at those, the better they'll be. And I wanted to do a quick follow-up from the goals workshop. I know we had a number of outstanding issues that I emailed you all on, and I apologize, Jim and Paul, I will send you an email out later just so that you can have comment. There were a number of documents that came out during that meeting that we wanted to, if there was any feedback, just needed to be routed through, and a few things of follow-up. We'll be hitting the goals later on in the agenda as well. I'll open it for oral communications from the public. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, item 5. I want to make an acknowledgement of the following donations. An iPad valued at $450 donated by Judith Canning to be used at the Newbury Elementary School TLC program. A donation in the amount of $100 to help cover the purchase of shirts for the high school band as an alternative uniform. The donor wishes to remain anonymous. And funding for the high school robotics team by the Institution for Savings in the amount of $3,000. The donation will be used for kits, parts, and hardware for the robotics team competitions. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Got a unanimous consent. And we have Miss Olivia Valley here for the student advisory report. Thank you, Olivia.
Our first day of school was on Tuesday, September 4th, and in order to make the first day a more positive and welcoming environment, Student Council played music and handed out stickers as students got off the buses. This tried to help assimilate the freshmen into their new high school. Student Council held its first meeting on Wednesday, September 12th. The meeting was led by the President, Lillian Fulford, Vice President, Grace McClellan, Member-at-Large, Grace Poster, Secretary, Farrah Gabriel, Publicity Officer, Sophie Proctor, and of course, Student Council's advisor, Ms. Bolio. There's been a good turnout of not only freshmen, but students from all grades who have joined Student Council this year. There are about 70 members, and with this year's strict attendance policy, Student Council hopes to have committed and cooperative members. Student Council also elected Kate Trojan as the School Council freshman representative. Emily Wood and Jillian Nichols are Student Council's elected Northeastern Massachusetts Association of Student Council delegates. They will soon be attending meetings with delegates from other student councils to discuss this year's leadership conference scheduled for Tuesday, November 13th. There's a lot of school-wide enthusiasm about homecoming, and chairs for different homecoming events have been selected. Groups are responsible for the scoreboard, dress-up days, penny wars, the can drive, and of course the games. They plan to begin meeting and organizing events, supervised by members of the elected board, at next week's student council meeting. Student Council is also working on more long-term projects that aim to improve student life. For example, Allie Hawks and Grace Poster are working on an updated version of the handbook for student activities. They plan to collect updated descriptions from representatives for every club at school, making it easier for students to learn about and get involved in activities at Triton. Student Council is also continuing with last year's parking committee, a group whose goal is to lower the price of parking for students at Triton. There's also a push for senior privileges, mainly a senior lounge in one of the adjoining rooms of the library. On Thursday, October 4th, we had a guest speaker at an assembly who discussed mental health and suicide prevention. The students received this presentation really well and felt that the speaker explained things in a clear, precise way that made it easy for students to relate to, and they felt comfortable. What stood out most to students was the support that Triton teachers and guidance counselors gave to students seeking aid during or after the assembly. Guidance officers were aware of the sensitive nature of the topic and ensured that students felt safe and understood. Student Council has always been based on the improvement of student life, between enthusiastic greetings and informative announcements to encouraging attendance at school events. Student Council hopes to revive school spirit during the 2018-2019 school year and be involved in all Triton matters.
Thank you, Olivia. And I just wanted to note I had the opportunity to attend the executive board meeting for Student Council a couple of weeks ago, and very impressive group of students that are aiming to do quite a bit. It was impressive to see. Any questions or comments for Olivia? All right, excellent. Thank you, Olivia. I really appreciate you coming. Opening it for new business. For our new members, this is a point in time where you have the opportunity to introduce new topics that you might want to have covered in the future. Obviously, it's difficult due to open meeting law to cover anything during the actual meeting, but this is a point where we could choose to put things on a future agenda or have action items for various individuals to take away. Any new business? All right, moving on to reports and deliberations. A curriculum update on human sexuality education for grades 7 and 8. I believe Assistant Superintendent Croto is taking this.
So we have been involved in the process of looking at the health standards throughout the district and in what areas the health standards are addressed. Last year, volunteers who were part of the wellness committee took on the task to go through and do an assessment and evaluation about which standards we were hitting, which standards we were missing. So in that review process, we realized that, and we knew this, that we had, or we are not teaching some of the sex standards that are part of the health standards from the Department of Massachusetts. So we do have some programming available at the 5th and 6th grade level, and I want to make it clear that this is not a proposal for a whole curriculum. This is about introducing 2 or 3 new lessons in a grade level that would help to address some of the standards that are not being taught. So I just want to make that clear that this is not a full adoption of a program, but it is a way that we can at least honor some of those standards where we know our students need that information. So that's pretty much what led the work up to this point, is that review of the standards. What are we missing? What do we need to add to the curriculum? And so that is where this was generated out of. So what you can see is last year's review of the current health standards revealed that the standards related to reproduction, sexuality were not included in our current curriculum. The state's expectation is that students will acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to make effective personal decisions that promote their emotional, sexual, and reproductive health. So if you just look down briefly in 5th grade, you see in the first column some of the standards, the health standards that are addressed. This was also something that I think was eye-opening for us, that we realized some of these standards were taught in 6th grade, some of them were taught in 5th grade, some of them were combined and taught all at once, and some of them were spread out. All of the standards here that have been taught in 5th and 6th grade, they are taught by the nurse, and usually the science teacher is there, and guidance counselors. All of the schools have a different way of addressing the standards with different curriculum. We are hoping to streamline that, so they are using the same curriculum that is part of this middle school curriculum. The middle school curriculum that I'm going to talk about actually starts at 6th grade, so some of that can be substituted for some of the things that they are using now. So that's 5th and 6th grade. Nothing really is changing other than we are going to start to use some of the same curriculum as opposed to every school having different materials. Same standards taught. If you flip over to the 7th and 8th grade, you see in the left-hand column the standards that are going to be addressed, and then far over to the right, you see the different lessons, and then you see the corresponding lesson in some of the curriculum from, it's called Get Real Middle School Curriculum. And looking at the policy from the district, it talked about a research-based curriculum. It talked about giving parents an opportunity to review the curriculum, to have their child opt out if they wanted to. So all of that, all of those things were taken into consideration and will be addressed prior to any of this being taught within the classroom. So that's kind of an overview of some of the, like I said right here, there's 6 lessons that you can see. 3 of them are in 7th grade, 3 of them are in 8th grade. In 7th grade, we have a wellness teacher. She's also a humanities teacher, and she's great. She's been working with the school nurse at the elementary level, also at the middle school, to review some of this content, as well as with the principal at the middle school and myself. She is scheduled for some training in this as well. So I feel like we are preparing the teachers, and they have the necessary skills and strategies to address some of these topics. We may need to make some changes along the way. I feel like the lessons that we chose are not something that is because we made it really clear that the folks who are delivering these messages are not the experts. So we want to make sure that we're not just giving this information out and then, okay, bye, have a good lunch. So we want to make sure not be addressed, and it's something that is private and it's for the families to cover, then they just sign a form that basically says, my students will not be participating in this class at this time for these lessons, and there will be like no penalty or any type of mark against them, grade-wise or anything. Yep.
So we'll send information out about the program with that form.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll have, here's what we're going to do. Here's where you opt out if you don't want to participate, have your child participate.
Okay. Yeah, and they'll have the lesson plans too. So we're really not trying to be secretive. I think this type of information really needs to be public so people can actually see and make some choices about what they want or don't want their child to participate in this case.
Dina? Yeah.
Question. So Kim, will this, or a link to the website be from our wellness page on the district website?
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Yeah, love that.
And we can link that with the communication to parents as well. I'm hoping not a lot of parents opt out. That's my personal belief. This is happening. Kids are learning. Kids are experiencing. they need to be part of an active discussion. But just, I want to say this one more time. Kim said it very well. This is not a replacement for a comprehensive wellness curriculum. We put in the life skills program, life skills training, and that's happening grades 4 through 8, a handful of lessons, research-based, good quality curricula. Here, again, a matter of 6 lessons, good research-based curricula, but this is not the comprehensive. We have not arrived by implementing these elements. This is an important piece, some good, high-quality, high-impact lessons, but it's part of a larger plan, master plan in Kim's brain, and working with the Wellness Committee, that there's a lot of work to do because we have a big nut to crack as far as figuring out where and how to effectively implement a full, complete wellness curriculum.
Any other questions before we move on? All right. Seeing none, I will move on to the focus presentation, MCAS and accountability. And I would assume this is what our principals are here for?
It is. So I just want to cue this up. So first of all, one point I want to make, we have this information about 30 days earlier than we did last year. So that's a celebration. The Department of Ed is understanding that if this is going to be useful, formative assessment data that helps us drive instruction, then we need the information and the results sooner rather than later. So that's a very good thing. Last year we did a presentation in November. This year we're doing a presentation in October because the results came out sooner, which means the information came out sooner, which means that we haven't had the information as long as we normally would have. So obviously Kim has done a lot of work. Working with the principals. We have 4 of the 5 principals. Catherine Daw is on her way. She was trying to be in 2 places at the same time. I think she'll be here by 7:45. They're not going to necessarily share anything, but if there are specific questions. But certainly to thank them for being here, but just to put a caveat as Kim's trying to answer all the questions, we don't have all the answers yet. We have areas where we want to celebrate. We have areas where we have identified some concern and we need to dig deeper. But I just want to make sure I say that before Kim's on the spot to say we don't have all the answers yet, but this is the start of a discussion. So with that, I will turn it to Kim.
Okay. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide a basis for understanding of Triton's MCAS performance, including the relationship to the state and some of the surrounding districts, to inform the committee of the structures that we have in place within each school, to review some of the data and make informed decision about how to best respond to some of the results that we have seen. And then obviously to review our current thinking on how strategic shifts of some of our existing resources and structures within schools so that we can provide greater support for student learning in all of the subgroups. So that's the purpose of tonight's presentation. So the big picture, and I just spoke a little bit about this, is really about education of the whole child, which incorporates many factors beyond just achievement level. And so I have shared this visual with you in the past, and we really need to take into consideration all of these different domains that will impact, without a doubt, the intellectual well-being of a child. So first off, let's just compare some of our surrounding towns. I chose Amesbury, Triton, Pentucket, Newburyport, and the state just because of the proximity of those. So this comparison shows 2 different things. It shows economically disadvantaged students, but also shows the districts with the number of students with disability. The state has 32% students that are economically disadvantaged, and it has 17, almost 18% of students with disabilities statewide. If you look at Triton, we are below the state as far as students with disability, and that is true with all of these surrounding towns as well, Newburyport, Pentucket, and Amesbury. We also are probably 3rd then in line as far as our population of economically disadvantaged. So we have 20.6%. Amesbury has 23, Newburyport 9%, almost 10%, and Pentucket 11.7%. We have seen these numbers increase. The economically disadvantaged number increase over the last few years, so that is something that has been on the rise. So accountability indicator. Oh, did I miss one? What?
you just go back a slide, please?
Yeah, sorry,
'Cause
sorry.
I
I'm like,
heard
I
a
thought
lot
I
of
heard-
school committee
Yeah.
members talking about this
Yeah,
as
yeah,
we
yeah.
were. The students with disabilities, the number that you were pointing out first, it looks like Triton is below and Newburyport is below
Sorry.
the
Yep.
state. Yeah, but
Yep.
Pentucket is above and Amesbury is above?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify that because it didn't seem to match with what you were saying.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yep. So we talked a little bit last time about some of the new accountability indicators. This new accountability is very different from some of the past accountability indicators. Achievement and growth have always been part of the accountability. They've added in high school completion, beyond that, extended engagement, annual dropout rate, English language proficiency, that is totally new. And then they've also added the additional indicator of chronic absenteeism and the percent of 11th and 12th graders completing advanced work. Advanced coursework includes advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment courses, and other selected rigorous courses that have been approved by the state. So when you look at all of these accountability indicators, in the past, we were not held accountable as far as our rating on English language proficiency. So some of these are new in determining where we are in that accountability. And the other thing that I want to point out is that the weight is in the achievement, and then second to that is student growth. So not all of these are weighted the same. Things to consider. The state has continuously said you cannot compare 2018 accountability to any previous accountability ratings. If it's a different system. Somebody was talking today and they mentioned, are you a level 1 or level 2 this year? And I'm thinking, we don't use that language anymore. So that's important to remember. This is the second year of MCAS 2.0. The high school has not yet taken that new MCAS. They are still on the legacy MCAS assessment. This coming year will be the first year. I anticipate it is going to be a challenging year for them. I think the rigor of the assessment is going to be new for them, and they will have some struggles, but we are trying to and working to address that right up front. For the first year of, this is the first year of an online assessment for grade 5, and also the first year of an online science assessment for grades 5 and 8. So again, getting acclimated to a new testing platform also has some impact in this assessment as well. This year, everybody will be online with their assessment, including third grade. So we're trying to plan how we can give third graders enough practice so that that does not impact their growth and their achievement level. So as far as accountability district, so the way that they distribute districts are either requiring assistance or not requiring assistance or intervention. And so you can see here, again, the same towns that I'm comparing, we were not requiring assistance or intervention. The state anticipated that at least 85% of the districts would fall into this category. And the way they determine the accountability is by the percent of targets that you've met. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So as far as our targets that the state met for us, and that was about growth, we hit about 55% of them. And that meant we were partially meeting some of our targets. So in the big picture, sometimes we exceeded target, sometimes we made improvement, but we didn't hit our target, sometimes we flatlined, and other times we declined. So all of those get pulled into one big bucket, and then they determine whether or not you have met your targets or partially met your targets. I do want to say that 2 of our elementary schools, for their criterion reference, if they were compared by themselves, met all of their targets, and that was Pine Grove and Newbury. And I also want to say that Salisbury was very close to meeting all their targets. So those targets were set on achievement and growth from what they did last year, okay? So we want to be, our trajectory, we want to be moving up. Any questions about this? So, okay. So what were some of, like, taking a big picture view of this, what were some of the areas that, like Brian said, at first kind of look over, what were some of the big telling things? Well, for some of the the GLOWs is that we exceeded or met science targets in 2 of the elementary schools, which we were pleased with. Last year, remember, was the first year we implemented a new science program, as well as the assessment had was only testing standards that overlapped, so that made it a little bit tricky. We had moderate growth to high growth in math in grades 3 through 8. So in order for it to be considered moderate to high, you needed to be in your growth percentile somewhere between 40 and 60. At the middle school, we were in the 50s and 60s. So I think what that says to me is that was our 3rd full year of implementing Math in Focus. We had some struggles, which is very normal when you're implementing a new program. It takes a while for the teachers to get used to the program, the curriculum, the pedagogy. We talked a lot about the standards being changed to really incorporate some practices as opposed to just memorization. We're still working. We are not there yet. Our goal is to see, like I said, that bar go up, that growth. So some of the resources that we have in place, we will continue to have in place this year. We also saw moderate to high growth in ELA, grades 4 through 6. We exceeded target for our annual dropout rate. So we're working really hard at that high school level to make sure our dropout rate does not increase. As far as areas that you're going to see in this presentation, 3rd grade ELA and math achievement levels were really, really low. And so we've already started to kind of peel back that layer to see where we need to intervene and how we need to intervene. So those pieces are definitely in our forefront of our thinking and conversations. Science and math achievement levels at the high school continue to decline, and we are, again, addressing that situation to find out where, what subgroup, what are the standards look like, and then what's actually happening within the classroom. We had 2 new science teachers last year, so again, kind of just trying to pull this all together to ask a lot of questions and then get some direction with that. Without a doubt, one of the biggest areas that I would say all but Newbury, we had a 0 for points, and that was for absenteeism. The state now determines that absenteeism is part of your accountability indicator. Students cannot miss more than 10% of the time that they are attending school. So we had a fairly high rate as far as absenteeism at different schools that peaked at the high school. And also, if you look at the subgroups who had the highest level of absenteeism, it was the economically disadvantaged subgroup. So there's definitely a correlation with that. So again, we need to look to see what can we do as a district? How do we use our resources to make sure that we can communicate the message and follow up with students who this is becoming chronic? I also want to add that they did not distinguish between excused and unexcused. They also did not distinguish between students who are out because of medical reasons and are receiving private tutoring or tutoring through the school. So that's another point, and I do believe that some of the other districts are bringing that up as far as some conversations. And then the other grow that we need to grow is 4-year cohort graduation declined. And so again, that was a little concerning. Again, this is based on one data point I want to also add, and I don't think I mentioned that earlier. When targets are set or were set with the old MCAS, they used 3 data points to make a target for you. This is based on 1. As years go on and we get more data points, that is going to even out because they're going to average those 3 together. So this is based on the previous year's progress. Does that make sense? Or achievement level? Riveting, I know, right? So let's get into some of the numbers. So again, you can see the towns on the bottom. State, Triton is here, Pentucket is here, Amesbury, Newburyport. And then over here, I think it's really important for us to look at the high needs population. The high needs population, the subgroups that make up the high needs population are your EL students, your students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged, okay? So that group in of itself is what they consider the high needs group. So that's what you see on the right. So this is grade 3 across the district, all averaged in together. This is the percent of students who were meeting or exceeding the expectations in grade 3. We were at 38%, and we were not, this was concerning, very concerning. So I know the principals have had data meetings and looked at and kind of started to unpeel that layer and have already addressed the scores and looking to provide additional resources, supports with teachers to address that and find out what we can do to increase that. And then over for the high needs, we have 12% again. That's concerning, absolutely. And we do have some plans in place.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
On that high needs group,
Yep.
what is the language? Is there a language issue with some of it?
No, as far as ELs?
Yes.
Our EL population, we have about 25 in total of ELs. So
Okay.
it's not a large population.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim, can I ask a quick question too,
Yes.
please? In looking at this, obviously you're taking the entire district.
Yeah.
Is this representative of all 3 schools, or were there differences between the 3 schools?
It was not representative of all 3 schools.
Okay.
And that's the other thing that gets tricky, because I don't want to, we're a district, and when I do this presentation, it's for a district. So it's hard to say we have an issue at this school, but the other 2 are doing fine. Or we have, it gets really complicated, because I want to look at it like a data, but that has a huge impact.
Yeah.
If you think of averaging, when you have so many scores, what it does to an average, and then it's why you have to go back and start peeling back the layers, because you don't want to be putting resource across your entire 3rd grade when it's really maybe at one school, or maybe it's just one teacher or 2 teachers. That's the type of information that the principals all have, that we've had these conversations, we will continue to have these conversations, and there are action plans in place.
I think I was going to say the same thing, but I mean, we could peel this apart by school or by teacher, and I don't think that's a public discussion.
Right.
But that is absolutely the discussions that it's now past tense and ongoing, that are being had. In the level of data we have, we can pinpoint very specifically where the concerns are, and that is what is being addressed, absolutely.
I was thinking more in the other direction. Do we have a model to look to say, this is where it's being successful? Can we
Absolutely.
emulate this? Or was it a general, no, we don't have kind of a prototype to look to in the district to hopefully...
And I would just say, I think there is models within each school. I don't think we have to put one school and pit one school against another. I think there are models within each school that we can look to and say, okay, that's working, clearly, unequivocally, without a doubt. Absolutely. Good point.
And we also looked at, too, the number of students in a class. We looked at what was the class profile, all of these different things. Like, when you start peeling back, you just get more and more questions, which is a really good thing to do, because you want to make sure that you're addressing the issue and not something else.
Ina?
I was just going to say, I did go on their website and look at the 3 different schools, and I agree that we're looking at it as a district, and this is good information, but I do think as a school committee, we need to be looking at least at the school level, because like to Nerissa's point, there are things that we could be sharing, and I'm sure the principals already are, but we need to be looking at that.
Linda?
In respect to the absenteeism, when you have students moving in and out, does the state take that into consideration?
Yes, they do. In fact, one of the big changes that I think is a positive change is that you have to be in the district for at least 2 consecutive years in order for your scores to be counted as far as the what's that subgroup
Chronically
called?
absent.
The what?
Chronically absent.
Chronically absent, no, or the low performing group that they're taking into consideration. Yeah, yep. So they are not getting penalized for that, which is good.
Any other questions before Kim moves on? All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
gets a little better. Okay, so 4th grade, and I just want to say one thing too about 3rd grade. 3rd grade is the start of the MCAS. It is not the start of learning. So if you look at 3rd grade, you have to look at the previous years before that. I just want to make that statement that it's about 2nd grade, it's about 1st grade, it's about kindergarten too. And all of this assessment, when you look at it, it's about each and every grade that we're doing the best we can possibly do to make sure that students are making the appropriate gains. So grade 4, 2018 percent meeting or exceeding expectation was 59. So we were above the state as far as our peers. We were below Amesbury. We're a little bit above Newburyport, and Pentucket we were above as well. As far as our high needs in grade 4, we were at 36%. So again, above the state. Amesbury was high, Newburyport was low. Grade 5, we were at 56%. Newburyport at 60%. Again, we were above the state. Our high needs was at 29%, meeting or exceeding expectations. And you can see the comparisons. And I will also put a link, I'll send you a link that has this PowerPoint so that you can look a little bit deeper into it. I know that the handout is not visually, you can't read it. You need a magnifying glass. So in grade 6, meeting or exceeding expectations, we're at 65%. And so here, I think we've always done really great as a 6th grade. And again, I think it's about, I think Dina, you had mentioned, looking into classrooms where we see rigor, we see engagement, and we see some standards that are really strong and powerful anchor standards. I was in a 6th grade today, and the rigor of the material that they were working on was very impressive for even at this point of the year. So some really great things going on there. As far as high needs, grade 6, we have 32% meeting or exceeding expectation. We continually need to strengthen this area to support our high needs staff. We are addressing that right now. We have had interviews with Alan Bloom as he's interviewing special educators. He's interviewing instructional assistants. Again, pulling in some data so we can address where there are some deficits and some serious needs. 7th grade, we had a decline in 7th grade in ELA. We did not anticipate this. It was probably a larger decline than we have seen in the past. So again, that is certainly an area that we want to look deeper in to find out, what was going on. We had 46% meeting or exceeding expectations, was even with the state. And then as far as our high needs, grade 7, we had 21%. So again, looking into that to find out where that drop and where that happened and in what area. 8th grade, we have 56% again. We have, we're above the state. We're a little below Newburyport, comparable, and then we have 30% meeting or exceeding expectations. And then 10th grade, they go on to, they have not taken the new MCAS 2.0, so they are taking the legacy MCAS, and this is the graduation requirement. This is where I feel like the state has brought down the rigor of the assessment in such a way that it evens the playing field in the sense where everybody looks like we're doing great, and I think that's a disservice because I think at that 10th grade level, once you hit that mark, we need to keep striving to improve achievement. And then the other issue that plays into this is the state has acknowledged the fact that more and more graduating seniors are having to take remedial English and math classes. But if you lower your standards in 10th grade, then that could potentially happen because you're missing some students who still need additional support in those later years.
Dina?
Yep.
Kim, you had mentioned a couple of times already that they have not, this year, the 10th grade has not taken this. What happens to those students who didn't pass it as a sophomore last year and are going to be taking, are they taking the legacy MCAS for this year or are they taking 2.0?
No, the students who participated in the legacy will continue to take the legacy even if they didn't pass.
Okay, so
does that make sense?
So they're not going to have to switch?
No.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was ELA. we're going to go on to math. Last year, math scores were really, really low. We, again, anticipated that. We were struggling with a new math program, with new math standards. We were looking at resources. We were looking at the scope and sequence of the curriculum. I'm actually even more excited for this year going into it. The math specialists worked really hard over the summer at the elementary level. They found they found that there was standards that were in certain grade levels that really should be at a higher grade level. And we wanted to stretch the students as far as their abilities, but they felt like they were spending more time on standards that were outside of the grade level. And that happened in a few different grades. So they, with the work of the Math in Focus consultant, were able to move a few of the lessons around so that I believe it is a better flow for the students and that the teachers are able to concentrate in on the grade level standards that they need to, but yet still allow for that enrichment and that stretch. So third grade, again, had some challenges, and we spoke a little bit about that in ELA, and it continued into the area of math.
Kim, can I just ask two quick
Yep.
questions about what you just said?
Yep.
Why wasn't it identified previously
Which one?
that there were standards that were being taught at certain grades that weren't?
Yep, that's a great
applicable?
question. So with Math in Focus, they have standards that are within the grade level, but they also have like stretch standards, I want to say, that are above grade level. And when we looked at materials, we wanted to make sure we had a curriculum that not just taught kids at the grade level, but we also had a program that could address some of those things beyond the grade level. So we would introduce them to them, but they didn't have to master the particular concepts. And I felt as though as they were doing it, they were getting bogged down with that upper level stuff, trying to get everybody there, where more time needed to be making sure that people were had mastery of the concepts at the grade level. And like I said, I want to say 5th grade was one grade, but it wasn't all grades. It was certain grade levels and then certain units. So there was some shifts in that. But you know, to hear them in action when they're talking, everything that they're doing is, the math specialist was so thoughtful, and all of the feedback that they collected from the teachers, I thought was a really healthy process that started last year when we pulled that initial math implementation back together to say, okay, it's been 2 years, almost 3 years. What are you seeing as gains of this program, and what are the areas that we still need to address to move that needle?
So are they using those stretches more for differentiation now, or
Yep.
are they
Yep,
being
absolutely.
pulled out?
Yep. So for kids who are able to understand a concept, instead of spending 3 or 4 days on something that's out of grade level, they might go over it really, you know, in one lesson, and those kids that are able to understand and comprehend that will be able to move further, or they can have them work at a back table and the teacher can pull them back and kind of teach them that higher level math.
Okay, thank you.
So this is grade 4, 48%. These are not high numbers, but again, if you looked at the trajectory of where we're going, we've made some really, some improvement with our math. And we will continue to have coaching. We have the consultant coming back next week, actually, and she will be here for 3 full days from Colorado. Grade 5 math, meeting and exceeding expectations, 40%. 15% high needs. Again, this is not where we want to be. We have a long ways to go, and we are going to continue to work towards improving achievement. 6th grade math, 55%, which we were pleased with, and then 27%. Grade 6, high needs. 7th grade, 44%. And 25% meeting or exceeding with the high needs. 8th grade, we dropped 47%, and then 24% meeting or exceeding expectations, high needs. Grade 10, 82%. This was definitely a drop. I talked about this before. There hasn't been a lot of new changes over here. So again, this is concerning. We need to look at this. We need to unpeel that to find out what's going on. We need to do an analysis of all of the different standards to find out, is there a particular place that we're struggling in? And then visit some of the classrooms to see what's going on. Catherine already has had some conversations with teachers about looking at data and making sure that we are addressing the needs there. We have 60% advanced proficient as far as our high needs population. And then in science, we've made some improvements as well. We are not where we want to be, but we are going up, and that's where we want to, what we want to see in the trajectory. We had 44% Triton. As far as grade 5, which we did see an increase in most of the schools in grade 5, meeting or exceeding expectations, 26. I want to say they met all of their targets in grade 5. So again, the state put them on a trajectory. We met or exceeded those targets. In grade 8, 39%. And then the high needs, again, not where we want to be, but we are going up. And then science dipped down too this year. So we're really looking at that. Definitely a priority area, as well as third grade. Let's see. So then as far as the district level, just with this first initial overview of the data, what are we doing to address? We are definitely have continued targeted high quality professional development in math. We continue to use our math consultant from Math in Focus. She comes to the district and spends about 3 days, and she works with grade levels that we've already targeted because of some of this data, and that she'll go in and do her own observations, give the principals, the math specialist, myself feedback about where we need to go, how to get there, and some resources, so that's super helpful. I also want to mention, I felt like it was a short summer, but being here all summer, there was a lot of PD offered, not just through the district, but also outside of the district. And we had, I actually did a tally yesterday, 50% of our teachers, 50% of our teachers are involved or did some type of PD over the summer or are currently involved in a graduate level class. So I think that speaks to the willingness and the dedication of our teachers to improve their educational background about how to best support students. So, and I don't know what the other towns as far as PD looks like, but we do have a lot. We have 2 courses going now that are, one is taught from one of our math specialists who has a PhD in action research, and so that's been a really popular class that teachers are offering, and we were also able to offer the Trauma 1 class again, which at first we thought we were going to have to cancel, but we were able to rally, and our principals have all taken it, and Beth is involved as well. So again, definitely a dedicated staff. We switched this year, was the first year, again looking at some of the data from last year, that at the 5th and 6th grade level, they are now either teaching a math and science, so they're limited to the content that they have to deliver, which is a good thing because some of the content is really not about the breadth of it, but the depth of it. And so for a 5th and 6th grade teacher to become an expert in either the sciences and the math, as opposed to the civics and the ELA, is becoming a popular model. And we are seeing through the data that when you do use this model and you provide the training to give them that extensive background, that absolutely impacts student achievement. So this is a new model that we are using this year at the 5th and 6th grade level. I think one of the drawbacks of that is they talked about limiting kind of that social and emotional engagement that the teacher has with the student. But the feedback that we have is that that's not happening, and that the teachers at least have those students for two consecutive class times. Let's see. Additional after-school activities to support STEM. We are bringing back the science fair, but it's going to be a science, technology, and engineering fair. So we've already, that has already been undergoing, and that will be advertised soon. So we really want to try to enhance and improve some of our after-school programming so that we can give students more opportunities to explore that. I know Newbury has started their Makerspace Lab and has been very successful with that Beth helps to facilitate. We also are looking at some of our after-school programming to make it more focused, giving kids more of an opportunity to use some of that inquiry-based questioning and activities. I know Pine Grove has not had an opportunity yet because of the building construction, but they will have a room and that will be open soon to be able to do that as well. We are working with administrators to strengthen that evaluation process, and we can only strengthen that evaluation if we can enhance and increase the instructional knowledge of the people who are doing the evaluations. So we're really trying to kind of unpack some of the teacher rubrics as far as, well, what does engagement look like? What are some of the things that you would look for as far as evidence when you go into a classroom, so that we're really starting to increase the capacity of our principals as instructional leaders to go in and make some solid observations so that they can really support educators' growth. Because that's truly what we want this evaluation system to be, not I gotcha, but more of a growth model. And then to continue to monitor our implementation of our new programs and practices. We cannot just implement a program and then walk away after 2 to 3 years. I am a huge, you know, my implementation platform, and I won't go into it tonight, but we owe it to the students, the taxpayers, the teachers, the principals, everybody who is invested in any program, to make sure that that program is implemented with fidelity, and when it's not, that we need to intervene. And so I think what I saw as far as the math scores is and even the ELA, we're in science, we're not there yet, but we're making those adjustments, we're making that trajectory, we're hitting those targets. We still have far to go, there's no question about that. We are not burying our head in the stands. We are not making excuses. We are working hard, and we have a lot of more work ahead of us that we need to address. And then the data analysis at individual schools, that is ongoing right now, and they are in full force starting to unpack this. I have to say that the state has opened up Edwin Analytics, and that's their kind of their database where they keep all of those layers that you have to unpeel. And it's a little intimidating, and last year we really tried to get teachers on board with that, and it was almost overwhelming. Plus the data came out, by the time they were able to look at it, it was like December. So it was so far off. This year we've had more teachers email and ask us for passwords or help, and that's like tripled from what it was last year. So that's, again, promising. It's the beginning of the year, we're getting this data early, people are invested and looking at it. So that's definitely a better spot to be. Each of the high school has kind of what they've targeted as far as working with some of the existing resources that they have in place, and then thinking about how can they restructure some of those or replace those so that they can get some better results. So at the high school, we have math, science, and English departments. They're starting to analyze the MCAS data through item analysis, which is really getting at that question level to identify any specific areas of student need, and then potential shifts with the curriculum. That's going to be a real challenge in the science area, because as we move to next year, or this year, they're not still being tested on the new science standards. They're being tested on only the science standards that overlap. So if we're asking them to teach to the standards, but then they're only being tested on the standards that overlap, you know, that is a little bit tricky as well too. So just trying to get that under review, and the English teachers are reviewing the data from iReady. We mentioned in the spring, we were not able to use the iReady platform as far at the high school as we had hoped to. There were certain obstacles in the way that are no longer obstacles anymore, so we are moving forward with that, with the goal of addressing specific areas of student challenges within the classroom. The English department will continue to investigate best practices for classroom schedules, structure, which allows for targeted student support in identified areas. And then the high school administration regularly sending parent letters home. We talked about that absenteeism, addressing student attendance concern. The chronic absenteeism and tardiness, huge. Kids can't learn if they're not there. And then the implementation of a BRIGHT program, which is supporting students who are transitioning back from a long-term absence. So students who are struggling with social and emotional issues, instead of just bringing them back in, having some type of transition program that will really address their needs and help them mainstream back into the classroom and have a successful transition. And Catherine is here, so if you have any questions with any of these action steps for any of the schools, they would be more than happy to talk. At the middle school, huge shift with the new schedule. We've really tried to get some of those academic interventions into play at the middle school. We had no solid structure that gave us enough time to do that with their flex time. Now we have this time, and Al is working really hard with the new assistant principal to use those times so that they're really targeted and that the students have been identified and continued to be progress monitored to make sure that we're not surprised at the end of the year. We know immediately if something is not working or working. In November, I believe, he is going to be here to present with the assistant principal about what that schedule looks like and some of the great changes that are happening. So I already talked about progress monitoring. In the schedule, again, is data meetings. They're already put in place. I think last year they were expected, but they maybe were not in an explicit way put into a schedule. Now that they're put into a schedule and there's agendas, looking at student achievement, action steps are developed, and instructional approach in the classroom is being changed. So again, that information is being communicated out to administration, then administration can have that information so that as they go into the classroom, they know what they can expect. They have already reworked their IST process. IST process is when you have a student who is struggling. So again, it's with that understanding of we don't want to let this student drop. We want to bring this student to some professionals so that we can talk about what has been going on. Is it something social emotional? What are you using for instructional strategies? All these different things. So again, we have the supports in place to help students achieve. And then we have completed professional development on being a trauma-sensitive school, and they continue to concentrate on building a positive school culture where they just started Student of the Month and some different school fundraisers as well. Al, did I get everything? Okay, any questions for Al? Okay, Pine Grove. Pine Grove had 4 slides, and I said to Christine, Christine, I can only fit this much on one slide. So we chose kind of the big target areas. Develop an informal list of available resources for teachers, math specialists, reading specialists, mentor, teacher, and PD opportunities. Sometimes people or teachers may not know that these resources exist. So we've explicitly shared with some educators that these resources are available and highly encouraged they should be used. So in that respect, some of those conversations are happening. Hold weekly, monthly meetings to check in, which is really important. It's that accountability with teachers so that we can review the progress and determine if some of those additional resources need to be changed, or maybe that the intensity of that support needs to go up. One of the areas that we've noticed is that the vocabulary seems to be really low as far as our students, and we see that with our iReady results, which is our school-based. We also see it in the MCAS. And so one of the things that the reading specialist got together and developed based on some high-frequency lists of the Greek and Latin root scope for Greek and Latin roots, as well as prefixes and suffixes. So now we were able to provide 4th grade teachers, 5th grade teachers, 6th grade teachers a core list of those word elements that they need to know before they graduate. And then how do you use those word elements when you're trying to kind of decipher a word that you've not encountered before. And that's going to help with science as well, too. So it's impossible to teach them every single word, but if we can strengthen their word attackability and knowledge, then that's going to help with comprehension. Reading and math coaches will be assigned to specific teachers to coach in the area of ELA or math that will target improvement in Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 is instruction that happens for all of the students. So we have Tier 2, which is kind of that strategic, and then Tier 3. So there are definitely the need to have those coaches present in those certain rooms. Those are the same places where that principal is going to be meeting with teachers on a regular basis to have some conversations about the progress. And then peer observations and sharing of best practices, appropriately challenging learning experiences that support development of the 21st century skills. Administration and reading and math coaches will assist the identified teachers in continual reflection and improvement in terms of embedding high-level teaching and learning on a daily basis. And then the last thing, we're looking at time on learning. And I would say this is true with all of the elementary schools. What are the students doing and how long are they doing it? And our transitions from one activity to another, taking 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and where are we losing some generous teaching time? Where can we gain it back? And so those are some of the things that are targeted for Pine Grove. Salisbury's last. Newbury Elementary, continuation of math implementation team, which all of the elementary schools have, that helps with the implementation of Math in Focus, with a focus of anchor tasks and UPS. UPS is a universal way of attacking a math word problem that the math specialists actually are using at all the elementary schools. So I'm excited about that because the kids will have a similar process and language when they go into solving a problem. The continuation of the science implementation team, again, a very important component of when you're implementing something. And so what that team is doing is focusing on open response, claim evidence reasoning, in their writing, and you see that across, I would say, almost all the elementary schools. It's great. I saw it over at Salisbury today. Purchase of nonfiction literature to incorporate Inspire and STEM scope themes into their guided reading groups, which is great. They're integrating that content area. It's not separate. Incorporate vocabulary from Inspire and STEM scopes, that's our science program, in the Makerspace room, and reinforce the design process in Makerspace. Peer observations in guided reading groups, UPS, CER, those were already explained above, and teaching math anchor tasks. Increased use of keys to vocabulary routine, and there's that prefix, suffix, root list that I just spoke about. Salisbury has, I think, maybe one of the biggest projects going on this year, and it is incredible. You had heard before that Momenta, which was previously Bay State Reading Institute, is at Salisbury Elementary because of a generous donor. And so they are there for 3 years, and it is a comprehensive school-based training, and the goal is to improve literacy outcomes by using a unique combination of research-backed methods and mentoring teachers and school leaders on implementing new teaching techniques and improve leadership. I was probably out of battery.
Here's your cue.
I'm almost done. Seriously.
Just grab another one. It's dead.
I was going to do that, but all right, so I really am almost done. This is why Brian only lets me talk once a year. Okay. So I was there all day today, and Jim was like, "Are you leaving?" I'm like, "No, I want to stay." But it's awesome, and all I can say is these folks have been in some of the inner city schools, and to gain the type of insight that we're gaining from just having a different set of lens walk through the classrooms is amazing. And the teachers, they said, even from their first visit, have grown in their instructional practices. So I'm very excited that they're there, and the work that they're doing, not just with the teachers, but the leadership team, the reading specialist, myself, and Jim. It's been incredible. The restructure of 5th and 6th grade teachers to become kind of content specialists. So he is math and science, ELA, social studies, talked about that. Continued efforts to become a trauma-sensitive school. That's where the course is being held. The majority of the school has taken the Trauma 1 course and hoping to take the other level courses as well. Another thing that has opened up some of the opportunities for students is this is the first year, as far as Title I funding goes, in the past we were targeted. And targeted means that the resources that are paid for by the Title I federal grant can only be used for targeted students, so it can't be used school-wide. Once you hit a poverty level of 40% or above, you can apply to be a school-wide program. And that allows you to use your resources anywhere in the school. It doesn't have to be targeted. So that's switched over and gave him a little bit more flexibility in some of his funding, and then increased after-school activities to offer kind of, again, that greater range of science, technology, and engineering opportunities for students. So through explorations and other type of enrichment activities. I think that's it. That is it. Principals, if I left anything out, please feel free to take the mic. Anybody?
Questions? Paul?
So I'm just wondering, earlier in the program you talked about a teacher at grade level reaching up to a grade level above in an MCAS year and then determining that maybe that wasn't the brightest move. How do we address that kind of thing? Because, I mean, you know, to somebody, a non-educator like me, MCAS scores are important. Mm-hmm. And when you see the numbers that we have, and I will say, just for the record, I've handed out a paper about these communities that you've identified on the North Shore, north of us. We're in the ballpark. If you go south, they're eating our lunch. The Masco, the Hamilton Wenham, the Ipswich, they're not far from us. And how it's difficult to analyze from year to year how we're doing. Okay, because the state keeps changing the accountability standards, legacy, next generation, all those things are going into it. But you can peel that away, if you will, to use your term, and look at just what other communities are doing who are facing the same exact thing. And I know that the 4 you picked were in the ballpark, but the 4 or 5 that I picked south of us are doing incredible. And I just stand back and I'm trying to simplify things and I say, why? And I'm looking at you, Mr. Forget, not Kim, so you know where the buck stops.
So I will say this. The list that you have, the factor you're missing is the population. So when we talk about close to 21%, a high-needs population, that's the reality, because then that leads to chronic absenteeism. And yes, chronic absenteeism is an indicator in the accountability realm, but it's also a contributor to students achieving. So I think that's a glaring miss in this analysis. And then I also have some questions about the math of particularly, you know, the legacy advanced and proficient, how you got 52%.
It came right off the DESE website, Brian.
Okay.
I literally was on the website typing in those numbers.
Okay.
So if I'm wrong, I'll buy you lunch. But
no, yeah, I know.
If I'm not, you'll buy me lunch for a month.
I found them, but those aren't the right ones, though, because I went on the same thing and said these don't look right, and I went on to the website and those are the right numbers. So they weren't. You were doing ELA and math.
I did them exactly how they appeared, the percentage. How many kids are proficient? You guys look at the other side. You look at the needs, you know, who needs improvement. I look at the proficient and advanced, and the meeting expectations and exceeding expectations.
I think it's in the packet. Let me just
but I assure you, those numbers are not wrong. I've sent them to my chair as well, and I think she can verify for me.
I was just going to say, can you just make sure you're using your mic, because I'm not picking you up as mic'd.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly unpack the numbers, but the reality is, yes, there are areas we need to improve. The principals have identified them. We've identified a start to where we need to be, but we have a lot of work to do, absolutely. But I would say some of the communities that you've gathered here, I would never say the word never, but there's a reality to the population we're working with. if we're talking about the students who we're trying to bring up. We can do everything we want and do to help the students who can achieve higher, but there's no indicator necessarily here that helps us, that quantifies that and gives us credit. Where we get credit is pulling out of warning into needs improvement and out of needs improvement into that proficient and advanced. There's ways we can improve, and we will and need to, but by taking out of some of the very realistic factors, I don't think it's a fair assessment and helps us chart a course to improvement, would be my assessment, my take. You can disagree.
No, I mean, I hear you, Brian. You know, the population, I get that, but I mean, their numbers are just so incredibly more impressive. And my numbers are correct. And, you know, I looked at advanced and proficient, okay? It's just the flip side of needs improvement. I mean, there's no
Absolutely.
rocket science here. It's one or the other.
Yep.
So, I mean, the fact that I chose to look at that is just, it doesn't matter. You can just look at the other side and you get the same result.
Absolutely.
And I would say, too, that we don't shy away from those numbers in the sense where we look into those towns to say, what are you doing? Like, what programs are you using? How are you using your resources and your structures? Because if, like somebody else said, if somebody's doing something well, we have no problem trying to learn from them so that we can improve, without a doubt.
So now I have a Kim question. Is it possible that these other communities to the south teach more to the test than we do?
I don't think so.
I mean, how do you monitor
I don't
that?
think so. I really don't. I think one of the biggest things that I have seen as far as standards is the rigor has increased. And I'm not quite sure we've made some transitions to increase our rigor. We still have far to go. I would say that those schools have, maybe they might have more rigor in them. I don't know. That's why I'm saying, like, I would love to connect with them. Usually most of the roundtable discussions that we have are from schools within the North Shore. Those are not usually in attendance. They actually have a different set of problems as a high achieving district, which is interesting too. So yes, absolutely. Because what happens with those high achieving students or those districts is we have far to grow, right? So we have our targets and we can gain points, meet targets because we do have far to go. They don't have far to go when they set targets, so they have a really difficult time moving that needle up because it's harder to move the needle up than it is lower down here. So so they have different pressures from different other things as well too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brian, isn't it true, though, across the Commonwealth that the math and science scores are in shadow of doubt, that the scores aren't up there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Second thing is, with reference to what you said, I understand, I agree, but hasn't the state done a study that giving on the
Jim, can you use your mic? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Is it true that in the Commonwealth that they've done studies comparing Lexington, for example, to Holyoke, that the economic impact in the communities has leveled, and as you say, like in Lexington, the bar is higher, so it's more difficult. So I think that's helpful to the public, to even people around here, to know those other mitigating factors, because you still try to achieve, as you're saying, Kim, and everybody, principals, teachers, everybody tries. Mm-hmm. But you know, there are some issues that sometimes don't come to the surface that I think help people at all levels of your school system understand better.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think it's the expectations we have as a school, as the physical entity, and it's the expectations of a community. And you know, and it's easy for us to compare Pentucket and Triton. We're both three-town regions with fairly disparate towns. So we've got three very different towns in Pentucket. We have three very different towns in Triton. And that doesn't mean any one town is better or worse than another. Some towns have priorities over other towns. So, I mean, it's hard as a district to then set as a priority and say this is a priority. And certainly student achievement is a priority. But if that's not shared universally, then that's hard to move that needle. As you said, those socioeconomic indicators, it holds back the data that we would like to push. And so again, when you were saying that, Paul, I don't ever want to say never, but at some point we have to say if there are factors outside of our control that we can't control, then how can we accurately compare one community to another? And I think the Department of Ed would say what's most important isn't to put us next to 3 other communities on a piece of paper, or whatever this is, Paul, you have a dozen communities on the North Shore. It's about your own growth. And are you as a district moving the needle? And I would say we are and we're not. We've identified areas where we think, okay, we're making progress, nowhere near where we need to be. And there are areas where we have said, oh my, we have some glaring concerns here, and it took a matter of a week, and principals were rallying and figuring out how we're going to address this.
Can I
That's
just?
consistent with what Paul's saying, though.
Oh, it is, but Brian, I just think that, the state has done us a huge disservice by always changing the accountability standards, okay?
Absolutely.
It's laughable.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely laughable for them to continually change the standards, continually change the tests, and expect you people to improve. And you talk about, high-performing districts, it's harder for them because they have to move. But I shove all that aside because you can't keep it straight, okay? And you just look at what other communities do with their averages and their percentages. And all I'm saying is we need to strive for it. Because if you try to monitor from year to year, when the accountability factors are changing, and the accountability standards are changing, there's no way you can do it.
I will 100% agree with you, maybe even 110%, to say if our bar isn't higher than where we're achieving, then we've lost the boat here. The goal is to always be getting better. And you have to hold, whether it's a city or a town or just a number, a figure, we have to keep the bar high and keep aiming for that. Unequivocally, yes.
Linda, did you have something to do? Did you have a comment on Paul's? Because I just wanted to make a comment on what they're already talking about. Or did you have it? Okay, go for it.
In regards to comparing us to other districts, does implementing like the math and focus over so many years because of a budget resource, and now the science over a few years, do you think that possibly their averages may be higher because they had more funding to support the implementation of these brand new programs?
Right, and I can't speak to whether or not they had the funding to implement a program, but I can say that we were late in the game to implement a new math program. So when we looked at some of the other data to find out what they're doing, how long have they been using that program, we were at least 3 years behind, which isn't a huge amount of time. But again, if we know for a fact that whenever you implement something new, whether it's standards or MCAS or a new program, there's going to be this major dip. And like Paul said, with so many different variables impacting change, we're looking at like 3 things when we go into the classroom, right? We're looking at standards, engagement, and rigor. Those 3 things, because those are the 3 things that we want to hold teachers accountable for, that we want to keep high. Other things we don't have control over. And I will say that I believe we have finally, after this year, we will be in a good spot where there will not be any changes as far as standards. They've tweaked a little bit here and there based on teacher feedback, but the test that platform is already done. So we need to settle into the reality of where we live and the accountability issues. And then we have been rolling up our sleeves and getting into the classrooms and having some difficult conversations with teachers and making sure we have resources available as well, without a doubt. But I, with Brian and Paul, to your point, we are not happy with those scores. Are we happy that we're moving the needle up? Absolutely. Am I pleased with some of the structures that we have in place, even at the middle school, that are huge? Absolutely. So I think we can only continue to grow stronger and more educated about what our students need and don't need. Absolutely.
I just wanted to comment and say, I think it is on us as school committee members to think about our students in MCAS almost separately. When we're thinking about our students, in my estimation, I don't think we should be thinking about that one moment in time that the state is trying to capture, where they're looking at them at the end of one year, and then at the end of the next year, and then at the end of the year after that. I think we need to place far more emphasis on the district assessments, on what's going on with a student from September to January to May, than what's going on from those one or two testing days from from 2017 to 2018. I feel like the state is moving in that direction. I feel like this nod to accountability, although it doesn't go as far as I would have liked to see it go, is kind of a way of looking at that and saying, great, we get that one moment in time is to some degree about demographics, and that we need to view both students and schools as a much bigger focus, I guess. And I don't know, I just wanted to put that out there because this is absolutely an MCAS discussion that we're having right now, but I think it needs to be placed in kind of the whole context.
Yes, but as long as we're keeping it as a context.
Yep.
So for me, we could take this data and parse it. I could parse it one way, Ken could parse it another way, and each principal could parse it a different way and come up with different information. But if we're looking at the information collectively, it needs to be, I think as Paul was saying, it needs to be a bar, right? It needs to give us a data point to give us a sense. But I agree at the same time, it's got to be in the parameter of, paraphrasing, it's so cliche, but teaching the whole child.
Yes.
It's not just about how he or she does on a test.
I'm not saying it's unimportant. I just think there are other things that we should look to first, rather than, part of the discussion, not the discussion.
Agreed, and I think we could drive these scores up, not easily, but if we reallocated resources differently and focused on just getting the scores up, absolutely, unequivocal. Could we do?
I was just thinking, we'll
piece
cut
of
out
cake.
recess.
Piece of cake.
We'll do these things that
Absolutely.
we've just, and not
But
to
with
say
what we
that
have-
you have to do that to get those scores. You don't have to do that, but I think it's just that you have to look at other things.
Kim, microphone, please.
All right, look at other things. Yes.
You have two.
I know, right? You'd think I'd be able to use one. This one's definitely not working. Okay, so yes, I would.
So can I ask one final question? Dina, you mentioned, so I should ask that. Can I ask one final question? Thank you. You said that you would like to look at the individual schools. This is more of a, obviously, the middle school and the high school stick out as individual schools. Is that data you would like for us to follow up? I feel like there should be, we can give you that information, send it to you, break down by school.
It's on the website, though.
Yeah, it is, and I
all
was
on
going
the
to say,
website.
I've already
Yeah,
looked at it.
yeah.
I guess my point was,
Assumed you had.
yeah,
Red pen?
right here.
At the ready.
I think that needs to be a discussion that we continue, that maybe next month we kind of say, okay, we've further identified, because the principals will have another month to have looked at this information and said, all right, 30,000 foot level, this is what we decided we were looking at. Now, these are more concrete things. And to Kim's point, and you know me, I'm a big believer in looking at the district, I want to see what we're sharing, what information, what programming, what ideas, all of that we are taking, that might be working in Pine Grove, that we're using in Salisbury, or Salisbury to Newbury, or whatever the case might be. Because I know there's fabulous things going on in all three of those schools, as well as the high school and the middle school. But I want to see that. I want the communities to know that not only are we looking at this as a district, but we're looking at what the schools individually are doing and taking the strengths and the weaknesses and making them all rise up.
So I would say, I think in November 14th, I don't think in 30 days' time we're going to have a whole different set of eyes on this, but maybe we put it on the agenda in November to kind of as a takeaway for everyone heard, saw, and now has a chance to think about and just put it on, is there any other questions that arose? And then take it up at another time as far as kind of maybe halfway through the year to say, here's what we're seeing and how we're responding. Because then again, the report cards with the accountability piece will be coming out in December-ish. And those are still, I think they're open for comment.
Yeah, they're
If
gonna
you
be
would
new,
like to
so it'll be interesting.
submit on the DESE site what you think it should look like, they've got templates and kind of some thinking, and it's open for public comment. So,
I believe they closed that.
did it get closed?
I think so. I think it was a couple weeks ago, unfortunately.
They're also going to be highlighting what we offer as far as visual and performing arts, which they've never used. So you talk about another nod there to say, okay, it's more than just academics. So
Absolutely.
Any other comments before we move on? All right. No report from the Mass Association of School Committees Regional Schools Committee. So moving on to the monthly report of the Superintendent of Schools, please. Can I just interrupt? Olivia, you have been incredibly patient, and I so appreciate you being here. I see you watching the clock. If you need to go, feel free to leave.
For homework.
I hear you. No, we so appreciate you staying because I think it's really important.
But I want to.
Thanks, Al.
I want to say
I was just going to say thank you for the.
we've had the discussion, so thank you to the principals for being here.
Can we? I can't take public comment during the school committee meeting. I'm sorry. It can be asked afterwards, absolutely, but it can't be taken during the school committee meeting.
So I want to thank the principals for being here, absolutely, and also Olivia. And I know this has been a discussion you mentioned at Narissa that Narissa and I met with the Student Council Executive Board, and are encouraging them to use their seat at the table. They're getting the agendas now routinely. I thank Olivia for lasting an extra hour because I know they go sports and then they're thinking, okay, I have a couple hours of homework left. So I just want to say we're encouraging them, them being the student council, to take that seat seriously. I know, Dina, when you were chair, we tried as well, and it's hard because students are very busy, but they have a voice. They have the statutory right to sit at the table and share the student perspective. So I know they are, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but they have a parking committee. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at the efficacy of the parking fees, and that is a brilliant discussion for them to come here and be part of as we talk about civics education and having a powerful voice. So not in my report, but just had to say that. The NISIT program, just to note, in year 3, final year of the program, 3 full days and then 5 content days. Had a full day last week, have a content day tomorrow. The problem of practice is just a small cohort of North Shore superintendents who are new, who come together to discuss problems of practice. Pine Grove update, nothing new from last month, just to say still on track. Phase 2, which is the balance of A wing, as they call it in the construction docs, or the north wing, is coming online October 20th, moving in over that weekend, be moving in so that the following week, music, art, all related services, explorations, those rooms will all open up and be active and functioning. All-purpose room still as of December 20th, so that would basically be coming online when we return from the holiday break. And then as of November 1st, Phase 3 begins, which is the upstairs of the C wing or the south wing, which takes us through February. And then March through the end of the year is the lower south, and then the rest of the building and outside for next summer. So. Any questions on that? No? Good. I'm just going to keep moving in the interest of time. Updated personnel report. There was a question, actually Paul asked a question last month about he didn't see a name. Patty and I did a little digging on the history of the personnel report, and it has gone from non-existing to what you had seen previously, but it noted resignations and appointments. I think it's important that you get a personnel report that accurately notes every single person who was appointed or every person who leaves. However, there are reasons why people leave the district that is not for public consumption. So you now have a report that notes appointments and separation from service. We do note the retirees, but anyone else who resigned or was terminated or not renewed, obviously that information is not included in the report. So for clarity, this report that you have here tonight in the back of at the end of my report is everything back through June. So it encompasses the report that you saw in September, which was the summer months, as well as everything up through last Friday, right? There was one other we added, alphabetized or categorized by school and by date of action. So any questions on that? I don't know if you had a chance to read that, but so there's some minute detail there, everything from a stipend to a student who's working as a kids club counselor, you name it. So any questions, certainly feel free to ask, but that list should be far more complete moving forward. It's just what happened from last Friday through the next agenda that you will see in that report. Community resource liaison, I had mentioned this, I think, during our workshop, using funds from our Kids Club program. We did end with a balance at the end of last year. We have done away with several positions over the years, everything from a special programs coordinator to early childhood coordinator, now the Kids Club district coordinator and the Explorations district coordinator. As we've dissolved all these positions, all these little connections with the community and the resources we have gone away too. So folks who are able to have absorbed those roles, and we've, I think we've reached what we'll call the saturation point in what 1 or 2 or 3 individuals can do in any 24-hour period. So we all agreed that it made sense to use Kids Club resources to funnel back into supporting community, to connect with community support. So this is a part-time, 10-hour-a-week position. And we're starting off slow. I think it probably could be a full-time position. At this point, works well with 10 hours. And we did hire, you'll see in the packet, a woman named Julie Romano. She is a Newbury parent. And connecting her with all kinds of resources, from those that are needs-based, like a Pettingill House, on through other community resources, religious organizations that are just looking to get kids active. So we do that better when we connect with our community. So I'm excited about that. I don't know what I'm excited about because we don't know exactly the full potential of what there's going to be, but I think we're excited that there's a person dedicated full-time to this effort.
Dina?
Does this person have a background in doing this, or what's her skill set that was appealing to this position?
So she has a human resources
You
background.
pull your
and-
mic
Oh,
just a
I'm
little bit
sorry.
closer, please, Kim.
Might be dead. Is it on?
No.
Oh, it's on.
I've only killed one
You
mic.
whispering?
She has a background in human resources. She's also done a lot of PR work, so she actually has a really good profile that fits this position. She's also very self-motivated in the sense where, because it is so we have a job description and we have a need, and what she needs to help us do is to really tighten up what that job responsibility is. And one of the big charges that she has right now that we're working with is from Tina Lose from 40 Assets from the Newburyport, and we're unpacking that data. Then she's already collected a list of community resources that we can use to increase the assets of our students. There's a few grants that we can also apply for that she's already started to look at that. So she's a real go-getter, and her resume surely, definitely says that, but just meeting her for 10 minutes, and I would love to have her come after a couple of months and do kind of just a quick overview of what she's done, and then she can speak to some of her qualifications as well. And I'm really excited about this. I just spoke with her again yesterday. We had a meeting, so.
That's great, because
Yeah.
I think that once Tina's grant is up, I would hate to lose any
No.
momentum
Oh,
that
no, we can't.
we might have.
Yeah, and there's, the more I talk to her, she's actually driving some of the directions that the job is going that I didn't even anticipate. So that's when you know you have a right person, when she's taken your vision in a short amount of time and is already going like that. So
That's great. Thank you.
And so, again, we're going to talk about job descriptions. Didn't make an official job description yet because I think it's going to morph. If at the end of this year we think, okay, this is a position that we now have refined and we can support long-term, then we'll make it more formal, bring a job description, and future-proof. Any other questions about that? All right. Raptor Visitor Management, just an update. Seems to be going very well. I've talked to several secretaries, and aside from the short hiccup in that you have to have an ID for every parent, secretaries have reported that even when parents don't have an ID and they send them back to the cars, that parents are like, great, absolutely, go back out and get the ID. So I think there's, between the Raptor Visitor Management and surveillance cameras, I believe there's a sense of there's added security, and as much as there's nuisance and concerns about is Big Brother watching, there's a sense of it's good to have security measures in place. So in both of those, nothing new other than I'm hearing very favorable responses. As far as Alice training, we have had almost everyone now has completed an online e-course, which every staff member, 441 individuals took part in, from Kids Club workers right on through cafeteria custodians, you name it, the whole kit and caboodle. Everyone's taken the course. Last Thursday and Friday, we had our own trainers get certified as Alice certified trainers. We have 9 district folks. There are 1 or 2 officers from each of the 3 police departments. They all came back a little afraid because when you go to Alice training, they train you. So we're, just to confirm, and I've had a lot of discussions with parents, we're taking this slow. I have no intentions of airsoft, surprise drills. This is not the approach we're taking. I do not believe in training by fear. I think we train by repetition, and then just like a fire drill, if you have a fire drill at a movie theater, everyone just quietly walks out. They learn that in school. So it's just about repetition. So we're taking it slow, but the first all-staff training will be in November. Again, it'll be slow, and then from there we'll roll out drills. And as I promised several parents, and I've mentioned here, before any drills where students are participating, there will be notification that goes out to parents to expect when you hear this and see this coming. And then the final piece is just a really long press release, but just to note that Senator Bruce Tarr asked if I would be his designee to the State Commission on Educational Transportation Efficiencies, I think is the formal title. So I believe Brad Hill is the appointee. He named himself. Is that right?
That is my understanding.
That's
yes.
what it is.
Yeah.
As the House minority
leaders. Yeah,
Bruce
appointed.
named me as the Senate minority leader appointment. And then it'll be Senator Hines, who is from Pittsfield, but does have regional experience.
I think he has 5 regional districts,
That he-
parts of.
that he touches?
Just like Representative Hill only has, he has Rowley and parts of other districts.
So Hamilton, Wenham,
Yeah.
So it's not a regional commission, but I'm hopeful that there are regional heads around the table. And while we're going to look at efficiencies in transportation across the board, I'm hopeful that this will be another opportunity to talk about the challenge of being a region. So the charge, as I asked Senator Tarr, is not really clearly defined. What's the time commitment? Don't really know yet. But the charge is that a report is due to the legislature by December of 2019. So I will certainly keep you updated as anything is determined there. So I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may or may not have.
Linda?
Is that paper-worthy?
Say that again?
Is that paper?
For Senator Hines, it definitely was.
Yeah, can we just talk timing? I said yes, and Senator Hines released his press release like 36 minutes later. So
But I'm talking the local paper.
Yes.
I think that should be put in the local.
if you believe it's paper worthy, I will absolutely make it paper worthy.
So, so I think there are going to be 12 or 13, I believe, designees total. So there are only 3 designated right now. It may be worthwhile to wait for the whole.
Let's do it now while he's
Okay.
only one of 3.
Okay? The
And
paper
they
it
came
goes.
after Brian.
No, for the record, I like Linda's thinking.
All right. Moving on to superintendent goals.
So just to clarify, you have a printed copy on the table tonight, and I emailed this to you. Nothing of substance changed from last month when I presented them to you. We talked about them in ad hoc during the workshop, and then Dina had made several suggestions about streamlining, not streamlining, but making the timelines more clear. So throughout the goals, the actions, and the evidence, there's several places where the timelines got more specific. So. Unless there's anything new, I'm certainly happy to discuss, but they remain intact in principle from September.
Can I have a motion to approve the professional goals for the superintendent of schools for the 2018-2019 school year, please?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Yes, unanimous. Moving on to the 2018-2019 school committee goals. So these were formulated by the school committee at the workshop on September 15th. It was a Saturday workshop that we all got together for. I took the notes off the chart in my, actually I think they were Deb's notes off the chart, and kind of coalesced them into the format that we usually use. A lot of this is pulled over from last year since, as we discussed at the workshop, we were so overwhelmed with budget discussions last year that we had a hard time addressing these goals. just 2 comments on it. I know one of the things we talked about was accountability. There will be, once we start into these, a new agenda item, which will allow for updates for all of the meetings that have been attended and any advocacy that's been done during the time since the previous meeting. And also, taking a note from Dina from last year, I started to put together a list of all of the meetings, meeting dates, that type of thing. It is on the shared team drive. I'm not sure if you two have access to the team drive yet, but I will definitely ask and make sure that you do. And you can, there are 3 groups, I believe, that I don't have a full year of dates for yet that I'm still tracking down. They weren't posted on the website. I haven't been able to get them by contacting people. Once I have them, I'll update them, but feel free to start adding names on there as soon as you are ready. Can I have a motion to approve the school committee goals for the 2018-2019 school year as drafted and presented?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. All right. We need to appoint an official voting delegate and an alternate to the MASC delegates meeting. The resolutions are included in the packet, and the delegate assembly is on Wednesday, November 7th.
Friday.
Oh, Friday? Sorry.
Friday the 9th.
Friday.
Friday
Okay.
afternoon at 3:15.
All right. There we go. Friday the 9th.
So
Apologize
I
for
will
that.
just say I will be there on Friday.
Yeah.
So
I will too.
Okay. Do we have a delegate and an alternate then? All right.
Living up to those honors.
Can I have a motion to appoint Dina Sullivan as the delegate and Deb Choate as the alternate for the purposes of representing the Triton Regional School Committee as the MASC at the MASC annual delegates meeting on November 9th, 2018?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. The proposed resolutions were included in the booklet. I hope you've had a chance to look through them. The one that I think I would particularly draw your attention to probably is resolution number 4, regional school transportation. That has to do with the commission that Brian is actually going to be sitting on. Obviously, they're all important. I need a motion to approve the resolutions as proposed by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and published in the member packets, please.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
So just to be clear, at the
Yes.
delegate meeting, I hope you are authorizing Deb or I, if any amendments are made, that we use our best judgment, knowing the makeup of our committee, to support or not support.
Do I have any discussion on that? Would you like me to make a separate motion?
We've usually done it as part of the delegate and the
Okay.
alternate, just because you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes they make amendments, sometimes they don't. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Student handbook final review, please. Is that back to Kim?
So let me cue this one up. So the review of handbooks has taken on a life of its own, and Dina's got more tabs. So here's where we're at with this process. Undertook the process of making sure that we had all the legal requirements in the handbook. That certainly took far longer than we anticipated. When we brought them to you in September, there was a lot of discussions, feedback about layout, consistencies or inconsistencies. So our goal for now, this year, is to focus on making sure that the language meets the requirement legally as you adopt these as a policy. And then the balance of this year, so when we approve these next year, it's to make them flow better, look nicer, put some pictures back in. I mean, the elementaries have all kinds of pictures, personalize them a little more for the schools. But just to say these are not where we want them, I think I can collectively say that this is not where we want the documents to be, but at this point I feel like we need to approve something as a final format for this year as a policy document. So I don't know, and there's been some changes, what you had delivered to your house versus what I emailed you, or Kim emailed you, or someone emailed you 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
What were the changes?
the cheese sandwich.
The cheese sandwich still existed
like,
there.
It sounds funny, but honestly, this has been a great exercise. As tedious as it is, when you get principals around the room who do things differently, which you may or may not have even realized until you start to unpack one of these documents. There's certain issues that provoke more discussion, and for whatever reason, the cheese sandwich, more about what do you do when students have outstanding balances and you don't want to draw attention to them. So again, I say cheese sandwich, in light, but it was really a deeper discussion about some serious issues. So we took the cheese sandwiches out. We are still looking at different ways that we can collect outstanding debt, but we have not formalized that yet. We're still under discussion. And then there was one other piece of it that we changed that are in those newer documents.
So formatting, aligning things, consistencies.
Yeah, those right now it's in a Google Doc, and Brian and I go back and forth. But when I'm sharing with principals and trying to get some input, Google is, for me, the world that we live in. Once we figure out all of the headlines and the spacing and everything like that, then it will go into a different
Word document.
It'll go into a Word doc, and that would help with some of that as well.
And so the exercise here brought about a big discussion in the fact that we have always talked about we're one district, so we want to be unified in our approach, but we want to maintain the autonomy of each school. So obviously at the middle school and the high school, that's easy, different grade levels, different schools. At the elementaries, it's hard to say we want to be consistent, but also allow some autonomy. And so this process has unearthed some discussions, as Kim said, the cheese sandwich, and it's the things that you don't think will be a discussion, very, very, very big discussion. So just to note that point.
Can I say one more thing that about this process is that there were certain things that different schools wanted to highlight and really put at the front of the book or a different place. And for consistency purposes, we did put them all, or we tried to map them out so they came at the same place, they stated the same thing. And I had mixed feelings about that. For example, Salisbury has a high absentee rate, and so Jim put a lot of effort and thought and ideas into really trying to educate parents about what happens when your students are out. Absenteeism may not be an issue at Newberry. And so to have 3 or 4 pages in a handbook dedicated to the reasons why just seemed a little out of place for them. So those were the types of conversations, I think, that we're still having. And that's some of the autonomy, I want to say, that was taken out of the handbooks, things that people really valued within a school was maybe either the highlight of it is not as what it was to begin with, or I don't know. So I just, again, brought about a lot of different discussions about how far do you go to put a document that has all the same stuff, but then you've done it to such a degree that individuality is taken, and what that school stands for is no longer there. And I understand that there has to be, because I think right now we have a baseline as far as information that should be there. What I'd like to see is this, and then give it back to the schools to say, okay, but then it's going to come back and it's all going to look different, and then so where is that balance, I guess? So we're still, like I said, working through that.
Bina?
After reading all of these, I actually think that I agree with you, Kim. There's a lot of it that is boilerplate. Mm-hmm. But I think Jim going into further detail about absenteeism and everything is absolutely appropriate. And I think it does kind of retain the flavor of Salisbury, since that is a unique situation there. So I like all of that, and I think what has been done here is very good. The only question, or my only concern, 2 things that were raised. Not everybody has the district vision in here, or they have the old one. That should be in all 5 of them, and please, at the front. Yep. Secondly, for the middle and high school, we need to mention about the availability of extra help, before or after school extra help, especially if these are going to be online. There's a reference to it in the high school one, no reference in the middle school, but even the high school one, if these are going to be online,
Should be a
there
link.
needs to be a link. So, and I did go through some of these with formatting and, you know, questioning some things. So some of your work's already done for you.
Thank you.
But I think
Yeah.
I was, from the difference that we had from the first time to these, I like the improvements
good.
that were made.
Okay, so I'm taking notes, so. I'm sure you already have
me just
them
pass those down.
alphabetized. Priority. Oh, my God. I am so afraid right now.
You're amazing.
Oh, my.
Linda?
Heritage work. You need to do the heritage.
The other thing that I'd like to see is that we have a new Raptor system. In the high school, it's on page 60, and all the other schools, that's at the beginning, with it being a new program that should be in the front so people understand. Also, I know we had discussions about policy and other things that we discussed for the handbook, but you have general information that has excerpts of certain policies, and then at the back of the book you have the full policy. People will only see, if they're looking at this, they'll only stop at that
Right.
excerpt there, not knowing that you have the rest of the policy at the end of the page. So we
Would have a
either-
reference in the body
Yeah.
to the, I mean, because obviously it's not the entire policy, but the free and appropriate public education, HERA, asbestos, any of those that it refers to the back
and
of the
like the
book.
guidelines, you have the homework in the,
Yeah, just say complete guidelines.
Yep.
Yep, good.
so if you just put it there so that
Well-
people understand.
Yes, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think I don't even think I've had this discussion with Kim, but even to change the format of the books to say, vision and all of that piece, but if you're visiting the school, so frame it as a document like that. So as a visitor, here's what you can expect, and to know that the beginning of the document is about visiting. Here's what the classroom expectations, and so obviously the high school is always going to be a little different as far as the content. But I think those are the pieces that we've said. Okay, now we've got legalities,
Yep.
solid and confident. Now it's a matter of another project. So.
So from before to now, like Dina said, it's improved a lot.
We're getting there. Not there yet, we're getting there.
I would agree with that. I think it's a big step forward. So kind of two comments for beyond this year is I want it to be welcoming. I want it to be more friendly. I want it, and I also would like to have, I think this was sort of Brian's point here, more thought about the priority of where things exist in the handbook. It doesn't flow logically. It doesn't, the information that I want to see first is not in the front, that type of thing. The one thing I will say about this year, and I have a few earmarks myself, although I didn't do the tabs, please, if we're going to say first name dot last name at tritonschools.org for all the email addresses, we need to have first names and last names spelled properly. And where they've divided up first names and last names like the high school did in the grid, sometimes the first name's in the first column and the last name's in the second column, and sometimes the last name's in the first column and the first name is in the second column. So, yeah, so
That in the,
if you look at, I didn't pull any, so page 8 is a good example. So Sharon Riordan is the top one, and then the next one under that is Collins Ryan, unless his first name is Collins and his last name is Ryan. I'm assuming they're flip-flopped all throughout this. And even looking down that page farther as an example, Teresa Carroll is spelled Tercy, which could be a name, but if they try to email that, obviously not going to work. So, and I think communication is key, so that's one I believe needs to get fixed this year.
yeah, I agree. We'll do that
I
tomorrow.
have a couple other ones too. I know Deb McKinnon's name is spelled a couple different ways between the different elementary school handbooks. Sometimes she's an MAC, sometimes she's an MC.
Okay.
Any other comments on school handbooks? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the handbooks as amended from the original versions and as amended tonight, as they were originally proposed on September 12th, 2018?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right. And policy and advocacy subcommittee update, please. Linda.
We had a meeting just before this meeting, and we're still in the planning stage of advocating at the community level by talking to our Council on Aging. None of the Council on Aging was able to make it tonight, but a couple of the PTA presidents were there, so we came up with some good ideas to start with, and Brian will be discussing some of those with the administration, and when he gets answers on that, then we will start making plans. And I have calls into the Council on Aging to meet with them and inviting the PTA presidents if they want to come along. And in the next couple of months, we're going to start putting the policies to the full committee to review. And that's it.
Thank you, Linda. Personnel and Negotiations Subcommittee report, please, Dina.
Thank you, Narissa. In the packet, there is the bundle of job descriptions and proposed hiring ranges that we've been working on. We've gone through this ad nauseum to make sure everything is in order. So we would like to have these approved as a first reading.
Should I wait for discussion? Or so I was just going to say, so there's more information as far as minutes, and there's a sheet of collected salary information that is part of the minutes from the meeting in the consent agenda.
Right.
The packet here, the agenda or annex, whatever it is the completed, finished, with the recommended salary ranges included in the document. And I think this, to also note, we haven't ever done job descriptions as a first, second reading, but I think it's a pretty big packet, so it was an opportunity to have some discussion, go back, read in more detail, and then approve them in their final form in November after years of Dina and I doing this.
True.
Should not have taken this long.
All right. So I have one quick question before we go ahead on this. I know we require queries and fingerprinting for staff. It's not mentioned anywhere in here. Is that ever part of the job description, or is that just a generalized requirement for all? Okay. So that doesn't need to be mentioned.
Keep the description to qualifications,
Yep.
qualities, and then the actual job responsibilities.
Okay. And I have just a couple of logistical things that I'll funnel to you, Dina. Like, if we put a comma in here, it makes more sense because the way it reads, type of thing. Just little nitpicky stuff.
Yes, and I think we had that it varied with Monique, and wanted to elaborate into longer sentences. And there are definitely some that, not to say there couldn't be some improvements, but there were some that could have been more clear if they became sentences, and we kept them. So, but absolutely.
Because you know how it is. You look at something so many times that
Yes.
Absolutely.
miss it.
Good to have, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the updated job descriptions as a first reading, please?
I'll make that motion.
I second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor? All right. It's unanimous. And Finance Subcommittee report, please,
I
Deb.
just say
sorry.
real quickly, Narissa,
My
too.
apologies.
Now that we have our new committee members seated, our next meeting will be November 1st. At 5, yes.
Deb?
Okay, we have one item that is in the, your agenda, but before we get to that, I just want to mention something else. We had a discussion at our meeting about our OPEB investment strategy, and as most of you know, we, a few years ago, we put $10,000 into our OPEB fund so that we would show good faith that we realized that was something we needed to do. And we discussed the need to have an investment policy for the OPEB funds. So I'm just bringing that to the attention of the full committee because we thought you ought to know that. I'm smiling at Linda.
Yeah, I see.
Okay. An investment policy for the OPEB funds.
Yes, we have a template on that we will be bringing to the policy subcommittee for review.
The other issue is, as you see, to receive a proposal and approve a 5-year contract with a new audit firm for the district annual financial audit. Contract is not subject to 30B procurement restrictions, and this is a contract we would execute directly by the school business official. We are recommending a 5-year contract. Contracts in excess of 3 years require school committee approval, and we had a discussion about the two main considerations for this contract, and there was pretty strong feeling from the experts that we should go in this direction.
Yes, we have discussed at length and in front of the full committee that we really need a new set of eyes on our books. We've had our current auditors for a number of years. I know it's in excess of 13 years. So we really feel it's time to move on to a new audit firm, new set of eyes. So we did receive proposals last week. At the time of our finance subcommittee meeting, we did not have all of our proposals, but we did discuss all the firms that we knew would be responding at length. And they were all qualified. Our current auditors did submit a proposal, but as our intent was to get a new set of eyes, we decided, because there was not a great price discrepancy, that we'd not be going with them. So at this time, I would like to request that you allow me to enter into a 5-year contract with Roselli Clark and Associates. It's a firm that I've worked with in the past, in addition to many other firms, but they are also the auditors for the town of Salisbury currently, and they have been very happy with their work.
Can I get a motion to authorize the execution of a 5-year contract with the Roselli Clark and Associations or Associates, okay, as proposed and attached in Annex 2, please?
I'll make a motion to authorize the execution of a 5-year contract with Roselli Clark and Associates as proposed in the attached, yes, and attached in Annex 2.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's a unanimous vote. Correspondence just included in your sorry, Deb, you've got a meeting on October 31st. Sorry.
Yes, we have a meeting on, in case any of you were planning on attending the meeting that was scheduled for October 17th. We're not having one then. But we will have a Halloween meeting for your...
Come in costume.
Yes, come in costume.
All right, and just a note on correspondence real quick. Apparently, the charter schools in our district area are required to submit their annual report back to the school committee. That's, I guess, traditionally been coming to the chair in the past. I wanted to make sure that everyone had access to it and was aware of it. So that's included in the correspondence section of your packet for your information. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
A second? Any discussion? All in favor? Excellent. Thank you. It's like a marathon by the time we get through the end of these meetings.
I know. It was pretty impressive that we get done by 9. I wasn't sure about